Your grandfather dropped out of high school in 1955, got a job at a factory, married your grandmother at 21, bought a house at 23, raised 4 kids on a single income, retired at 62 with a pension, died owning his home outright with money in the bank. You have a college degree, maybe a master's. You work 50 hours a week at a job that requires constant education and certification. You're 35, and you rent. You have $40,000 in student loans. You've been saving for a house for 7 years, and you're further from affording one than when you started. You'll work until you're 70 if you're lucky, and you'll probably die with debt. You did everything right. He dropped out of high school. You're not lazier than your grandfather. You're not dumber. You're not less disciplined. You're playing a different game, a game that was redesigned 50 years ago to ensure that people like you can never win. Because between 1971 and 1986, 5 specific mechanisms were installed into the American economic system. 5 traps, each one invisible, each one legal, each one extracting wealth from working people and transferring it upward. Your grandfather didn't face these traps. They didn't exist yet. You face all 5 simultaneously, and each one compounds the others. The system isn't broken. It's working perfectly. You're not failing to build wealth because you're doing something wrong. You're failing because the system was designed to make sure you fail. Let me show you the 5 mechanisms, who built them, when they were installed, and why you never had a chance. The first mechanism is inflation, not the inflation you hear about on the news. The structural, permanent, designed inflation that has been eating your money for 53 years. Before 1971, the U.S. dollar was backed by gold. $35 bought 1 ounce of gold. This limited how many dollars could exist. The government couldn't print unlimited money because they had to have gold to back it. This kept prices stable. From 1800 to 1971, prices barely changed over the long term. There were inflations and deflations, but they balanced out. $1 in 1900 bought roughly what $1 bought in 1800. Then, on August 15, 1971, President Nixon ended the gold standard. He called it temporary. It's been 53 years. Without gold backing, the Federal Reserve could print unlimited dollars, and they did. The money supply in 1971 was $600 billion today. It's $21 trillion, a 35x increase. When you increase the money supply, you decrease the value of each dollar. This is inflation. Not the natural kind from supply and demand, the manufactured kind from money printing. Since 1971, the dollar has lost 87% of its purchasing power. $1 today buys what 13 cents bought in 1971. Now here's the mechanism that makes this a trap. The Federal Reserve has an official policy of 2% annual inflation. They target it. They work to achieve it. You're told 2% is a healthy low rate of inflation. Nothing to worry about. But 2% annually means your money loses half its value every 35 years. If you save $100,000 at age 30, it will buy $50,000 worth of goods by the time you're 65. Not because you spent it, because they printed money that made yours worth less. This is a 50% tax on your savings. It's not called a tax. But that's what it is. Every year, 2% of everything you own is transferred to those who get the new money first. And who gets the new money first? Banks, financial institutions, corporations, the wealthy. They borrow at low rates, buy assets, and pay back later with devalued dollars. By the time the new money reaches your wages, asset prices have already risen. You're always behind. Inflation is a wealth transfer from people who hold money to people who hold assets, from savers to borrowers, from workers to owners. Your grandfather could save dollars, and they held their value. You can't. The system was redesigned in 1971 to make sure of it. The second mechanism is the wage productivity gap. From 1948 to 1973, wages and productivity rose together. When workers produced more, they earned more. This makes sense. You create more value, you get more money. In 1973, the link broke. From 1973 to today, Productivity rose 64%. Wages rose 17%. Workers kept producing more, but the money went somewhere else. Where did it go? Corporate profits, executive compensation, shareholder returns. The S&P 500 is up 4,000% since 1973. CEO pay is up 1,300%. Worker pay is up 17%. Here's the mechanism. In 1973, the business community made a strategic decision. They would fight wage increases at every level. Union busting, automation threats, offshoring leverage, immigration pressure. The Powell Memo, written in 1971 by future Supreme Court Justice Lewis Powell, outlined the strategy explicitly. American business was under attack, Powell wrote. They needed to organize and fight back. They needed to influence universities, media, and politics. The business community followed the plan. They funded think tanks. They bought politicians. They shaped policy. The result was 50 years of wage suppression. When you negotiate your salary, you think you're negotiating with your employer. You're actually negotiating against a 50-year system designed to keep your wages as low as possible. And here's the trap. When wages don't rise with productivity, you need debt to maintain your standard of living. You can't afford a house with cash, you borrow. You can't afford a car with cash, you borrow. You can't afford education with cash, you borrow. The wage gap creates the debt trap. They work together. The third mechanism is the debt system. Debt in America has been transformed from a tool into a trap. Student loans, mortgages, car loans, credit cards, each one structured to maximize extraction. Start with student loans. In 1976, education loans were made non-dischargeable in bankruptcy. This means you can never escape them. You can declare bankruptcy and eliminate credit card debt, medical debt, even gambling debt. But student loans follow you to the grave. This was a deliberate policy choice. The argument was that students would borrow, get degrees, then declare bankruptcy and escape the debt. So they made the debt permanent. But here's the consequence nobody mentions. When lenders know you can never escape, they lend unlimited amounts. There's no risk to them. If you can't pay, they garnish your wages for 40 years. In 1980, average student debt at graduation was $12,000 in today's dollars. Today, it's $37,000. Total student debt is $1.7 trillion, more than credit cards, more than car loans, and the jobs don't pay enough to service the debt. Half of recent graduates work jobs that don't require degrees. They borrowed $100,000 for degrees that qualify them for $40,000 jobs. The education system was financialized, turned into an extraction machine. Now look at mortgages. A 30-year mortgage at 7% interest means you pay $240,000 in interest on a $200,000 loan. You pay more in interest than principal. The bank makes more than you do. And here's the mechanism that traps you. Mortgages are front-loaded with interest. In the first 10 years of a 30-year mortgage, 70% of your payment goes to interest. Only 30% builds equity. If you sell after 7 years, which is the average, you've barely paid down the principal. You start over. New loan, new 30-year clock, new front-loaded interest. The average American moves 11 times in their lifetime. Each time they restart the interest clock. Each time the bank extracts maximum interest before they escape. Credit cards are worse. The average credit card interest rate is 24%. If you carry a $10,000 balance and make minimum payments, you'll pay $24,000 in interest and take 27 years to pay it off. You pay 3 times what you borrowed. And credit card contracts are designed by PhD mathematicians to keep you in debt forever. The minimum payment is calculated to maximize interest extraction while keeping you barely solvent. Debt is not a tool to build wealth. It's a tool to extract it. Every loan product in America is structured to transfer money from you to financial institutions for as long as possible. The fourth mechanism is the tax code. The U.S. tax code is 70,000 pages long. But here's the secret. 69,000 of those pages are loopholes for corporations and the wealthy. The pages that apply to your wage income fit in a pamphlet. When you earn a salary, your taxes are calculated automatically, withheld before you ever see the money. You can't negotiate, you can't defer, you can't hide income in offshore accounts. When corporations earn profits, they have 70,000 pages of options: transfer pricing, accelerated depreciation, stock option deductions, offshore subsidiaries, carried interest, opportunity zones. The list is endless. The result? In 1952, corporate taxes were 32% of federal revenue. Today, they're 7%. The corporate share of taxes dropped by 78%. Where did that tax burden shift? To you. Payroll taxes, income taxes, sales taxes. The ordinary worker pays more, so corporations pay less. Amazon made $30 billion in profit in 2023. They paid an effective tax rate of 8%. You made $65,000 and paid 22%. But it's worse than that. Because the tax code doesn't just let corporations pay less, it's designed to prevent you from doing what they do. You can't create an Irish subsidiary to hold your intellectual property. You can't deduct your commute as a business expense. You can't pay your kids a salary and deduct it from your income. You can't depreciate your home over 27 years. Everything that reduces taxes for corporations is specifically prohibited for individuals. The tax code was written by corporate lobbyists, literally. Staffers have admitted receiving draft legislation directly from industry groups. Congress just votes yes. You pay your full share. They pay what they negotiate. The 70,000 pages exist to make sure it stays that way. The fifth mechanism is asset inflation. Since 2008, the Federal Reserve has printed $8 trillion and used it to buy bonds. This drives down interest rates. Low interest rates inflate asset prices. Stocks, bonds, real estate, everything owned by the wealthy goes up. In 2008, the S&P 500 was at 800. Today, it's above 5,000, a 500% increase. Real estate has more than doubled. Bond prices rose for years as rates fell. If you owned assets in 2008, you've made a fortune. If you didn't, you missed it. And here's the mechanism that traps you. When asset prices rise faster than wages, assets become progressively unaffordable. In 2008, the median house cost $180,000. Median income was $52,000. The house cost 3.5 years of income. In 2024, the median house costs $420,000. Median income is $60,000. The house costs 7 years of income. Housing got twice as expensive relative to wages, not because of construction costs. Because the Fed inflated asset prices to benefit asset owners. The same happened with stocks. The S&P 500 dividend yield in 2008 was 4%. Today, it's 1.4%. To generate $40,000 in retirement income from dividends, you needed $1 million in 2008. You need $2.8 million today. Assets got more expensive while yielding less. You need 3 times as much to achieve the same result. And who owns assets? In 2024, the top 10% own 87% of stocks. The top 1% own 50%. When the Fed inflates asset prices, 87% of the gains go to the top 10%. Your wages buy less assets every year. Their assets buy more of everything every year. The gap widens automatically. This isn't accidental. Federal Reserve policy explicitly targets asset prices. When stocks fall, they print money. When real estate falls, they cut rates. They call it the wealth effect. If asset owners feel richer, they'll spend more. But the wealth effect only works for people who own assets. For everyone else, it's the poverty effect. Assets rising faster than wages means you fall further behind. Now let's see how these 5 mechanisms compound. You graduate with $37,000 in student debt. That's mechanism 3, the debt system. You get a job paying $50,000. In 1973, that job would have paid $85,000 relative to productivity. The missing $35,000 is mechanism 2, the wage gap. You want to buy a house? It costs $400,000. In 1971, prices adjusted for real inflation, it would cost $150,000. The extra $250,000 is Mechanism 5, asset inflation. You put your savings in a bank earning 1% interest. Inflation runs at 5%. You lose 4% per year. That's Mechanism 1, inflation. You pay 25% of your income in taxes. Your employer pays 8%. That's Mechanism 4, the tax code. Each mechanism takes a piece. Together, they take almost everything. Run the numbers. You earn $50,000. Taxes take $12,500. Debt payments take $7,200. Housing costs $18,000. Because of inflated prices, you have $12,300 left for everything else. Food, transportation, healthcare, clothing, entertainment, $12,300 for an entire year. Your grandfather earned the equivalent of $35,000 in 1965. Taxes took $4,000. He had no debt. Housing cost $3,600. He had $27,400 for everything else. More than double what you have on less income. He wasn't smarter. The mechanisms didn't exist yet. These 5 mechanisms weren't installed by accident. They were built by specific people making specific decisions. Nixon ended the gold standard in 1971 because America was spending too much on Vietnam. Instead of cutting spending, they cut the constraint on printing money. Mechanism 1 installed. The Powell Memo in 1971 outlined the strategy to suppress wages. Corporations followed the plan for 50 years. Mechanism 2 installed. Congress made student loans non-dischargeable in 1976 and expanded the program in 1978. Banks lobbied for mortgage rules that maximize interest extraction. Credit card companies wrote the 2005 bankruptcy reform that made debt harder to escape. Mechanism 3 installed. Reagan's 1986 tax reform, Clinton's 1997 capital gains cuts, Bush's 2001 tax cuts, and Trump's 2017 corporate rate cut each transferred tax burden from capital to labor. Mechanism 4 installed. Greenspan's 1987 intervention, Bernanke's 2008 quantitative easing, and Powell's 2020 money printing all inflated asset prices. Mechanism 5 installed. Each mechanism was a policy choice. Each one benefited the wealthy at the expense of workers. Each one was sold as something else: temporary measures, inflation fighting, job creation, economic stimulus. The results were always the same: wealth transferred upward. Here's what the numbers show over 50 years. In 1970, the top 1% owned 27% of wealth. Today, they own 42%. In 1970, CEOs earned 20 times the average worker. Today, they earn 350 times. In 1970, the median worker could buy a house in 3 years. Today, it takes 8 years. In 1970, a year of college cost 4 months of work. Today, it costs 14 months. In 1970, household debt was 33% of GDP. Today, it's 75%. Every number moved in the same direction. Every mechanism pushed the same way for 50 years. The bottom 50% of Americans now own 2% of the wealth. The bottom half of the country splits 2%, while the top 1% takes 42%. And the wealth gap is accelerating. The 5 mechanisms compound each other. Inflation erodes wages. Wage suppression forces debt. Debt payments prevent asset purchases. Rising asset prices increase the gap. The tax code accelerates all of it. The system is working. You're just not the one it's working for. You can't budget your way out of this. You can't side hustle your way out. You can't save your way out. The mechanisms are too strong. They extract faster than you can earn. Your grandfather didn't budget better than you. He didn't have a side hustle. He didn't invest wisely. He just worked. The system let him build wealth. The system prevents you from building wealth. Financial advice won't fix structural extraction. They tell you to spend less. But housing, health care, and education cost more than entire incomes. They tell you to earn more, but wages are suppressed by design. They tell you to invest, but asset prices rise faster than you can save. The advice assumes a fair system. The system isn't fair. If this changed how you see your financial struggles, if you finally understand why you do everything right and still fall behind, then you're starting to see the machine. The 5 mechanisms are still running. Inflation is still eroding your savings. Wages are still suppressed below productivity. Debt is still structured to extract maximum interest. The tax code still favors capital over labor. Asset prices are still inflating beyond reach. They built a system where you always lose. Not because you're not good enough, because the system was designed that way. And until these mechanisms change, the results won't change. Subscribe if you want to understand how to navigate a system designed for your failure. Because they're not going to explain it on CNBC, they're going to tell you to work harder and save more. But your grandfather worked less and saved less. And he won? You're not losing because you're worse than him. You're losing because they changed the game.